the topic that I will be presenting on today is the multi-state outbreak of Salmonella Typhimurium infections linked to tomatoes. For background, risk factors of Salmonella include being infected by animals, soil, the water source, and cross-contamination if vegetables are mixed with contaminated raw meat. Some symptoms include fever and diarrhea, and tomatoes do have a history of being vehicles of Salmonella, and this can be seen in previous cases. There are actually 3 previous cases that can be seen where tomatoes are the main culprit of Salmonella outbreaks. So for the current situation, the outbreak is actually not ongoing because all of the contaminated tomatoes were either already consumed or are no longer available since they were probably disposed of due to the short shelf life. Some strains show that the location of origin was actually able to be accurately traced to the growers and packers in Ohio once it was traced back to the source of the tomatoes, which could be seen in all of the cases. And weakness is that the exact means of the contamination are actually not known because the investigation was not able to be done until the next growing season due to the previous growing season already ending by the time the investigation began. And for opportunity, there's a good opportunity for education and improvement of food safety and handling. That includes the cleaning of food or the sanitation of the produce, or even the detection of foodborne viruses before they reach the table. And for threats, there are actually no ongoing threats because the CDC does say that tomatoes should not be avoided despite the outbreaks, since there are probably no current tomatoes that have the contamination of this strain. So for the priority of core issues, within 21 states, there are actually 190 cases. Within those 190 cases, 24 patients were hospitalized. And this is only of the known patients. And this was all taken between patients who had symptoms between September and October of 2006. And they were all linked to the eating of large red tomatoes. And due to the widespread of the cases, we can see that there was actually early contamination on the food distribution chain. So that's how they were able to trace it all back to the farms in Ohio. And the priority would be to prevent the distribution of contaminated tomatoes from these distribution centers. So for alternatives, the trans-theoretical model would be ideal to make actions of the distributors. And approach 1 would be to implement more effective cleaning of tomatoes. Approach 2 would be to try to detect contamination of at the source before distribution in real time. And approach 3 would be to prevent rain splash on plants to prevent contamination from soil. The third one is a little bit out there, but it is a possibility for the plant to get contaminated from the soil. For recommendations, recommendation 1 is to require growers and packers to acid wash tomatoes followed by regular water rinse in order to reduce the number of colonies of Salmonella. And recommendation 2 is to actively detect for Salmonella in tomatoes before distribution with phage-based magnetoelastic biosensors. So growers and packers should try to detect possible contamination in a cost-effective way, which can reduce the need for multiple washing done that still ends up having breakthrough cases that we can see with all of the outbreaks. The government should fund the research and initial implementation of this initiative to be completed by 2030 in smaller distributors to test the effectiveness rather than starting with large ones where it could have detrimental effects if it does not work out. And by 2040, the large growers and packers should also have it implemented, also being funded by the government. I think that this reoccurring issue can actually be preventative, since there are ways that it can be prevented from the source. It's just there are barriers in order to do that, such as the cost effectiveness and so on and so forth. So I do think that the government should have some aid in this. And the reason why the symptoms shouldn't be treated, for example, having a better tracing system, is because although this would make it easier to detect where the salmonella or the contamination originated from, this does put people at risk. So it would be better to attack it at the source. Okay, and this is my list of references, and I would like to thank you all for watching my presentation.